Hello and welcome to episode 152 of the Comedy Slab. I'm Adrian Lacey. I was going to say in the southeast of England, deep habits die hard. I'm not quite I don't feel fully in the southeast of England. I'm actually in rural Buckinghamshire again. Mm-hmm. Look at me, stretched out on my chaise longue. So I'm Adrian Lacey down wherever I am in Bucks, and up there in the Midlands, is himself Shane O'Connor. Come in, please.
Yeah, we were just debating, and if anybody knows the answer to this, please do text us, write in, whether there's a Shay short. There was the long one, the long version. I don't know, whether that was the extended, the 12-incher.
Yes. But there should be a mini-me, shouldn't there?
You would have thought, wouldn't you? It's for the busy man about town. He hasn't got time to... He hasn't got time to relax onto a chaise long, so he goes on a chaise short, and he's off and out again,
Anyway, nothing short about this show, apart from my temper, because I'm tired. But we've just been watching the footy, and I know everyone will have heard the result. This is the England-Scotland match in the Euros. It's called Euros 2020, isn't it?
No, not by me. I refuse to call it that. I do. I won't have it. I won't have it in the house.
So what, you mean you're a year ahead of everyone else, even though we know we paused things last year for obvious reasons?
Isn't it just ridiculous? Because it's every 4 years that they kind of think that the fan base are so stupid that they can't actually cope with calling it the Euros 2021, knowing that it was in 21 because of everything that happened. You know what I mean? It's a bit weird, isn't it?
I thought the reason for it was they didn't want to have to pay to change the logo.
I never thought of that. Fair play.
You don't think it through. Well, talking of fair play, how fair was it? We're not. This is not a football podcast, but once every 4 years, I get mildly interested in about one football game, and this was it. This time round.
Yeah, it was quite. I mean, I thought it was quite exciting first half. I think it kind of tailed off a little bit because Scotland obviously playing for the draw because that's like a win for them, isn't it? You know what I mean? So. The Scot in me, which is a quarter of me, is offended by that remark, but the other 3/4 thinks, yeah, go Shane. In fact, that was the scoreline I was hoping for, 3-1 to England, because I'm 3/4 English and 1/4 Scots, so that seemed to be about right. But it doesn't work like that, does it? No, you would. You get the best of both worlds with that, then, wouldn't you? You'd feel quite at peace with yourself.
I would, as opposed to the constant slugfest that is the inner war in the land of Lacey. I
tell you what does annoy me, just quickly, and it's just a little bit of soapbox thing. What really annoys me is that the England fans were booing very, very loudly at the England performance at the end of it because it wasn't up to standard, and I think Southgate didn't make the decisions that he should have done. But TV being TV, I constantly feel like the media treats you like a sort of a child that has to be protected from real life. And whilst all these England fans were booing, the commentator was, I think it was Sam Matterface, who I can only say, he was the one that famously, he's a bit of an Alan Partridge, isn't he? He famously said the defence is about as weak as a glass of squash, which is 9/10 water and 1/10 squash.
That's very Partridge-esque.
Oh, come on. Absolutely. I'm sure he did it on purpose just to get noticed. But anyway, then he's going, listen to what it means to the Scotland fans. And I can't hear him because the England fans are booing them and drowning them out. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? You can know what you're hearing and seeing, and they still say something else. But hey, what are you going to do? Well,
it's those wretched mainstream media types, isn't it?
Oh, no.
Anyway, so in entire turnabout, we are actually going to put on the Slab of Comedy, the notional piece of marble on which we dissect a different comedy, be it TV, radio, or digital, whatever you want to call it, podcast, etc. Each week we take it in turns to give each other homework. So this week it'll be Simon Bird, and Debrief is the title of his first stand-up special. It's a Channel 4 show. But before we come to that, actually staying with the Channel 4 theme, we've been looking at headlines just as we speak in the last 48 hours or so. Started with your favourite newspaper, if I can use an antiquated term, newspaper, The Guardian, and then it was picked up today by the FT, Financial Times, and then we've both looked at the Sky News twist on it. what seem to be fairly serious rumours of Channel 4 being privatised. We have been here before, haven't we, Shanester?
Well, I didn't. I mean, when I read the article, did I realise how many times I kind of vaguely had some recollection, but obviously I haven't been following the twists and turns of every minute detail of the life of Channel 4, as it were. But yeah, I mean, according to this article, there have been quite a few attempts, haven't there, to privatise it. It's really interesting because it's not a public service broadcaster, is it? Although it's owned by the government.
Well, technically owned by us, isn't it? It's a funny old hybrid. I mean, I would say it is a public service broadcast in terms of the remit it signs up to. Basically, there's a deal they do, isn't there? We're having prominence on the EPG, the Electronic Programme Guide, and we'll get to the comedy aspect of why this concerns us, or potentially could concern us, and you, dear listener. We'll get to that in a moment. So, almost as part of the deal of being button number 4 on most TVs on the traditional linear TV side of things. Obviously, the technology is going way ahead now, and streaming is going nuts. But the deal is you are a public service broadcaster with a remit to produce unbiased news, in mainstream hours, peak hours, blah blah blah.
Which is with the greatest respect, and I know we're not going to probably agree on this, but Channel 4 News could hardly be described as unbiased, could it? Really? I mean, it's so left wing. I can't actually see it on my TV. They're all.
Yeah, but try pointing your aerial to the left instead of to the right.
They've all fallen out the left hand side of the telly, and they're like lounging about on my coffee table. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's not. It's not. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because if people want that, if there's a market for that, that's fine. It's people will watch it, people won't watch it, but you could hardly describe it as unbiased, could you? I mean, it is one of the most left-leaning news channels. I
think, and Channel 4 News, that particular show at 7 in the weekday evenings, yes, it has a certain reputation. Well, to provide balance on your TV, try switching over to GB News, which started this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, the balance I provide, I just don't watch any of them.
Maybe that's the answer.
I get all my news off Twitter because I know it's true there, you see. That's the thing. So,
hashtag true.
I am joking.
I know.
But no, I mean, I was just making I wasn't having a go. I'm just making the point that's why I kind of feel that they don't fulfil the public service broadcaster remit, because I, like you, thought that would exactly be part of a fairly large chunk of their remit.
Yes. Well, let's not dig too far into that. But yeah, I mean, a point taken on that one. I mean, I guess on the Comedy Slab, we should be particularly concerned for comedy. And you've been quite fulsome in your praise, lefty-leaning Channel 4 or no, when it comes to availability of shows, particularly when you've compared it to BBC iPlayer about the shows that you might see a website for them on the BBC site, but it would probably say this show isn't, unfortunately, available at the moment. It seems a much higher percentage, whatever deal they've got. Channel 4 seems to have struck it more in favour of the viewer, which may translate into more money. The thing is, just digging into it a bit and reminding myself, because Channel 4 is a funny hybrid, it keeps its advertising revenue, but actually they don't own the IP, the intellectual property of the shows themselves.
No,
so,
I read the article and I didn't realise that as well. But when you think about it, there's a lot of buy-ins, aren't there? That's what I mean, there's one or two which I think are probably under their wing. Pardon the expression, but things like Green Wing, I'm just looking at now.
Good pun.
Toast of London, I'm sure, wasn't that a Channel 4 as well? But I mean, basically, what they're saying is that their problem is that they're at the behest of advertisers, aren't they? And of course, we know how fraught that can be at the moment because of the fact, the last year notwithstanding that, and as you mentioned, things like Netflix drawing viewers away, so that hits revenues on advertising as well. Yeah. But the trade-off is they don't own a lot. They're not making a lot of the programs, are they? They're buying in or encouraging or supporting or in partnership, but they don't own the property, the intellectual property, so they get no revenue. Off repeats or streaming or anything like that, do they at all? They don't get anything by the look of it.
No. Anyway, let's move on. So my all-important question, which you even have picked up on now, so it's a part of the Comedy Slab as we now understand it in 2021. What was your internal reaction, or indeed external reaction, when I set the homework last week? Simon Bird's Debrief. Simon Bird being an actor known for The Inbetweeners and Friday Night Dinner. Perhaps no coincidence, they're both Channel 4 shows. Were you pleased? Did you go yippee-dee? Did you think, not sure about that?
Well, can I sum it up in a word? No. Can I sum it up in a sound? Whoa.
That's Alan Partridge.
That's the day-to-day, isn't it? I think that was, no, intrigue. I think it was the emotion. I thought I was very intrigued. I thought, oh, hello, this is good. I mean, because we knew as much as it's a stand-up and there's no audience, so immediately you're thinking, well, how's that going to work? So my interest was piqued, I have to say, and I love a peaky interest, I really do.
Well, what would you have thought then? The corollary to that, another question with a long word attached. What would you have felt any different if, I suppose you'd have been less intrigued if there had been an audience there. Would you have been pleased because you like Simon Bird's work?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean that really was the main intrigue, wasn't it? Really, is you kind of think, oh, that is different. But yeah, I mean, I'd have probably. I mean, I still would, like you say, you still think, well, okay, I wonder how the lad's going to get on, because it's by no means an easy transition to go from one to the other, whichever way you're going, from comedy acting to stand up, or from stand up to comedy acting. They're both big moves, aren't they?
Absolutely, yes, and it's a high wire act. So in this first clip, Simon Bird is, I guess, because he's on his own. We'll park the thought that there's obviously camera operators and sound people and makeup and so on. He is on his own here. And so it's a sort of internal monologue to kind of chewing over how this is different and how he's almost missing the audience. Because, as we've had to bleep, he's about to tell us what sort of individual he is in the bear pit that is the normal state of affairs for a stand-up act.
Look at me. I'm a gladiator, mate. I thrive on that adrenaline-fueled bear pit atmosphere. That's my meat and drink. Slamming hecklers, spraying zingers, putting punks in their place. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than dealing with a drunken stag do, shouting my TV catchphrases at me and then hugging me at the bar afterwards and taking my glasses off my face and filming it all on their phones. I live for those encounters. For me, that all sounds almost too easy. This is free climbing, mate. Other stand-ups will spend months travelling the country, testing their routines, actually altering their material based on the response of a random selection of strangers. How weak and craven is that? What you end up with is this gleaming, radiant hour of unadulterated pleasure.
It's fascinating, isn't it? You kind of think, has he finished now? Because you'd where do you expect the laughs to be? Yeah. If I don't think of it, can I mention it now? Because if I ask you to remind me later, I'll forget, or one of us will forget. I did think, when you're saying about the camera crew being there as well, Kenny Everett sprung to mind.
Oh yeah.
Because he used to, was it his Kenny Everett television show? Was it when he was at Thames and he used to do
television show was when he went to the B, but it was
it might have been when he was at the B. Which was the one where
it was the ITV one where the crew were encouraged to laugh.
Yeah, and I wonder
the Kenny Everett video show, I think it was called at ITV or something like that.
Okay, yeah. I just wonder how that would stack up now, whether you go, oh, this is really sycophantic. And it did spring into my mind at the time. I thought, I wonder if they'd have been better off going, oh, well, let the people in the theatre have a titter and mic them up and see how that... You know what I mean? I don't know.
That might be a clue as to how each of us reacts to it and how funny we think it is. Do you want to give us a headline?
Yeah, well, I've got two. Do you want me to do both, or do you want me to pick number one and number two? Or I don't know.
We've got to have both ultimately. Yeah, give us the slightly weaker one. Weak as if it's diluted squash.
Well, I think they were both. They were both 9 parts squash and 1 part water, to be honest with you.
Oh, right, okay. Well, it better be good now then.
My first one was, I've been given the bird and I don't like it.
Oh, that's not sounding good from a point of view of, whether you enjoy the show.
And the other one was, Simon says, and I said no.
Oh, I thought you might go with the word brief and say it wasn't, as I might have said, it wasn't debrief enough.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That is it. This is a rich vein, isn't it? Normally we're struggling.
Stream of comedy.
Can't get one between us normally, but there we go. So yeah, but yeah, I'm afraid he's not going to London. It's a no from me.
He's already in London, so too late for that. But this was recorded in April of 2021, just before the the next level of easing of lockdown. And as we speak, we've got a 4-week delay on top of what was meant to be the ultimate easing. Pretty large. I'm sad, really, because, well, we always want to like these shows, don't we? I'm sad for you. I'm sad for me. I'm sad for Simon Bird, although I don't think he's going to lose too much sleep over it. I mean, there's loads of good stuff. Can we start with some positives?
Yeah, I mean, are you with me on that then, generally speaking, or are you?
Yeah, I don't know if we have the same reasons for it, although I suspect we might sort of meet somewhere in the middle on this.
Right. Okay, but the destination is the same for both of us then, really, is it? Essentially, I'm guessing that not a fan of. It's weird, isn't it? Because I'm quite a fan of his. I'm quite a fan of his past work, and I have this a lot in as much as I am quite happy with somebody as a comedy actor, even if they do a similar kind of thing every time round. And then this, for me, it didn't really take off. I mean, you mentioned that the first clip was a kind of internal monologue. I felt the whole thing was delivered like a monologue, but maybe there's no escape from that. Maybe that's how you have to do it.
In those circumstances, with no audience. Well, I didn't want to get into it too early, but maybe you've made me do it. I did find myself wondering at one stage, but probably more than halfway through watching it, and unusually for us, it's over half an hour long, which might not have helped under the circumstances. It's 45 minutes, but probably would have run in an hour's slot with ad breaks and so on, I guess. Although no, there's one centre break. I can't remember. Anyway, I did wonder whether this was ultimately, and particularly perhaps because of the lack of audience, whether this could be seen as, it's all getting a bit Stuart Lee and meta, but whether he's an actor playing the part of a stand-up and he's decided to do it that way, in which case the laughs are less significant as against what we're talking about, this internal monologue, asking himself sort of quite anguished questions. Does that fly for you?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, it's almost kind of like, and I did feel that he was trying too hard to do. It was kind of anti-comedy.
Yeah.
And even to the point where this is the point he said where normally the comedian will have a drink of water and lubricate his vocal cords, whatever. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to eat crackers. And to make his mouth as dry as possible. And it was almost like I kind of felt that he was going out of his way to say, okay, this is going to be anti-comedy. And therefore, it's okay if there aren't any gags in it or it's not funny, which never really flies for me, that one, because it's a bit like saying, well, here's a blank sheet of paper, it's anti-art, or I'm going to sit in silence for 3 minutes and that's anti-music. That's not. That's
John Cage, isn't it?
That's John, yes, 4 minutes, 33 seconds. Is it? I don't know.
I usually fade out after the first.
It's very samey, isn't it? It's very samey. And the album was no better, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, does that make sense? That kind of like, it's because it's not funny, it doesn't make it anti the art form. It just makes it devoid of the art form.
It's an odd one, isn't it? But it's an odd gig. And for me, as I say, there are loads of positives, like the fact he said yes to it and took the challenge. But I had to go back to his younger days, he's frighteningly young, really. You only have to go back 10 years to he's going for a student comedy award, for goodness sake. Maybe a bit over 10 years, but
I didn't realise he's an ex-Footlights lad, isn't he?
Yeah. So he's no mental slouch, but I think actually maybe the IQ is getting in the way to some extent, or at least the need to sound erudite, which people who use the word erudite obviously are pretentious so-and-sos. But I did feel like he used a word just there in the first clip we heard. Was it the word encounter? So that's 3 syllables, where most a working class comic might just say, "Oh, I don't like this." Maybe using an expletive. But encounter it's just a bit clunky and takes longer and slower. It's fine if you haven't got an audience waiting for you before they can laugh. So I thought I'd go back to this old footage, and I would encourage you and anyone listening to go back to YouTube and look up Simon Bird and just stand up. And I got to it pretty quickly. The first 2 were both just over 10 years or so ago, maybe 2007, so 13, 14 years. Okay. But where he was in the running for, I think he was a runner-up 2 or 3 years. And I think one of the gags is about the fact he was a runner-up more than once. But the audience is with him. It doesn't sound a very big audience. It's either that or only a tiny fraction are laughing. But they're with him. He's gaggier. Maybe he's just luxuriating in not having to be so gaggy. But coming back full circle to your point, anti-comedy, anti-art and all of that, you can only swim upstream against the tide for so long before you get knackered or drown or something. And it's not very satisfying ultimately, is it? I interviewed Kevin Day once, a great stand-up from the alternative comedy days, still writing and doing some stand-up. Not enough, in my view. Should get up there more. But he said it does say comedy at the door, over the door, so that's what people expect to laugh.
Yeah, the problem with it all is that as an audience member, you then start to do feel kind of, what's the point? Why are we here? What do you want out of me as an audience member? You know, how was I supposed to feel about watching this? Now, you have a lot. You're right. I mean, there's the sentences that he uses. There's a lot to unpack, isn't there? There's you know, you feel yourself, or I certainly felt myself going back over a sentence that he said and going, what now? And trying to unpick all the different bits and pieces of it. And then, of course, you've missed the next bit, and that could have been, where there was some gaggy stuff in there. I don't know, but yeah, I didn't laugh an awful. I don't think I laughed at all, actually. And I think that's always going to be a problem. And it felt. I mean, like you say, maybe it's supposed to, because like you say, he's not a stupid man. He's not a stupid lad, is he? He's an intelligent, accomplished for his age. Certainly for his age, he's doing very well. I didn't realise. You remember Liam Williams' "Please Like" that we slabbed a long time ago. He's actually directed series 3 of that. So you know he's had his directorial debut as well now in comedy. So he understands comedy. I was intrigued as you say, you said he was brave to take it on. I was intrigued as to why he took it on. I didn't get it at all. I didn't see what was in it for him.
Well, I mean, I wondered whether it was a genuine case of they thought by then they could have an audience, and whether they jumped the gun a bit and they were locked into a certain timetable and couldn't get out of it, or whether they sat around and thought amongst themselves, oh, this might be a new spin on it, and trying to dig something different out of COVID. As I say, you know, the nice guy part of me, in sort of maybe chin stroking rational side says, yeah, good on you for having a go. But the other side that's like you, hungry for laughs, thought, well, yeah, you should look before you leap. I mean, I thought if it was going to go down the route of saying, okay, we're not really going for belly laughs at all, I thought it could have gone even further the other way. This might sound like well, I am a malcontent, never quite happy unless I'm really unhappy. But to take it much more into sort of Beckett area, where it could have got more philosophical, but I guess it would have turned you off even more in that case. But at least it would have been clear. This is what we're doing. We're deconstructing comedy, and you can love it or hate it. But he wanted to sort of a bit of cakeism, I think is the phrase. Wanted to have his cake, saying, "I'm a stand-up comedian," but he also wanted to eat the cake that was, well, I don't have to do laughs because I haven't got an audience in front of me. I can do a bit of chin stroking.
I could feel it flowing out of my other ear. You know, it was going in. It was going in the one, and I just thought I'm just not retaining any of this at all. I couldn't. In fact, the clip that you played me, despite having been through it twice, was a shock. You know, I was thinking, oh yeah, okay, I'd forgotten all about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the curious thing for me is I read an article that he was interviewed by NME. And I think the headline was something like, "My career depends on escaping Will from the Inbetweeners."
Yeah.
And you kind of, and you think, well, actually, he kind of did it as Will from the Inbetweeners, didn't he? This whole stand-up routine was just like his character, you know, it was the intelligent. In fact, he made several references to the Will character that he does on the Inbetweeners. I saw him in a show called Chickens, which is about conscientious objectors, and he played the same kind of Will character. In fact, he's even doing Barclaycard ads now, where he plays a kind of Will character. And I thought, well, for somebody who's trying, you know, he thinks his career depends on escaping Will. He's certainly milking Will for all he possibly can. And I guess there is that kind of, it's a dichotomy for comedy actors, isn't it? What do you don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg, but equally you'd like maybe a chicken egg for a change. I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm stuck on the egg image. How much should I read into that?
I'm sorry, I'm a bit egg-bound at the moment, but I think I'll be all right.
On the egg-bound carriageway. Well, you said you wanted me to remind you of something, or you didn't trust me to remind you. So before I forget to do the production company credits, it's a Baby Cow Productions production in association with People Person Pictures. Now, I thought, I started to think like you, Shane. I started to think, oh, well, I'm guessing, because we know Baby Cow is Steve Coogan and Henry Norman, very successful, long-running production company. I was going to guess, yes, People Person Pictures, Peter Piper picked a piece of pickled pepper, has to be Simon Bird's company, and sure enough it is. And you probably looked it up as well.
I was too much. I was upset by that stage. I couldn't really see for the tears.
Well, anyway, and they weren't tears of laughter by the sound of things. No. It's based in Hemel Hempstead, which may make you laugh. It's not necessarily the first place on earth you associate with comedy, or I associate with it, but being raised down the road in Watford, there's that tension. What did Freud call it? The narcissism of small differences. So
I know. I used to know a guy. Worked with a guy once who came from Hemel Hempstead. He used to call it Hemel.
Oh yeah, or Emil, as my mate called
Emil, it. Yeah. They said, they hated Watford, didn't they? I couldn't really see that. Yeah.
I mean, if they'd had a football team, we could have really hated them properly.
Yeah.
But anyway, what they had was Kodak back in the day. But I think
what Kodak's a great detective he was.
Kodak's a diminished company, although it's big in the medical world, I believe. Anyway, this is not. This is not the film camera slab. This is the comedy slab. So, are you ready for the second audio clip, do you think?
I sure am, Coochie Coo.
What to say? Well, there was a recurring theme, and it is sort of COVID related. And it came, I thought, I wasn't counting at the time I watched the show the first time through. But then I thought, thinking that it's maybe roughly a 3-act structure, I wonder whether this theme comes back 3 times. I certainly knew it came back more than once. I just wondered, is it 3, 4, 5 times? But it is, sure enough, 3 times he says something along the lines of, well, it's not like it's ever been the case that, well, I'm not going to say it because he's going to say it for you. Right. But I'm going to ask you, Shane, the other side of this. and I think I know the answer by now, but whether in any sense this theme resonated with you and whether you thought there was any merit in the way he'd structured his show and kept coming back to this, if you will, to sound totally Radio 3 and pretentious, the leitmotif or theme that we keep returning to. So he's talking now about funding. He's about to talk about the lottery. It's about money for good causes, or is there another way of funding good causes?
God, they're so annoying, aren't they? People. If only there was another way to redistribute wealth that didn't require the general public to spontaneously coordinate the entire operation themselves. But no. Weirdly, the only way to ensure the sick and vulnerable get the care they need nowadays is to peer pressure a 100-year-old war veteran to walk up and down his garden repeatedly until he's pushed his weak and crumbling body beyond its physical limit. I'm being facetious, obviously. The deliberate underfunding of our public services is bizarre, but fortunately, as far as I'm aware, there's never been a situation where it's come back to haunt us by hampering our ability to contain or treat a new and fast-moving medical emergency and directly contributing to a totally unnecessary loss of life. It's just never really reared its head, that particular set of circumstances.
I found it a little bit. I felt like I was being lectured a lot of the time through it, and I found it very mean-spirited in a lot of its content. I mean, not least there, you kind of think, this is a play for let's all be a socialist country now. There was things that he talked about, things like flag-obsessed jingoism, which when I was a kid we used to call it patriotism, but hey, that's each their own, as it were. And there were other parts of it as well where I kind of thought it's just like really kind of. He did a bit of shtick about naming storms. And the people at the Met Office or Met Offices around the world named storms gave them women's names, so that they could make jokes at the expense of their wives and girlfriends. Which again I thought was, because if you actually look it up, it was actually in tribute to their wives and girlfriends. That's why they used it. And it's kind of like this implication that naming storms after women is sexist. And you kind of think, well, what about ships? I mean, that used to refer to ships as she. That sexist. But I thought, isn't it sexist not to name them after? I don't know. Who knows? But you just kind of think I don't know. I felt a lot of the material was either hectoring or irrelevant. That's how I felt, and none of it was funny. And that was the big. I kind of, whichever way around you go, I always come back to that starting point that I didn't find it funny. Is that a fair point, or not? Am I just being oversensitive?
Which is the fair point? I mean, if you didn't laugh, you didn't laugh. So it's failed as a comedy for you personally, hasn't it? Yeah. I might just be expressing the same thing in a slightly different way. It just sounded like an intellectual argument he needed to get off his chest. It's incredibly wordy, and I'm a fine one to accuse anyone of wordiness. That's one of my many failings. But I'm not a stand-up act, and if I was trying to do stand-up, I would cut some of my clag, as it was called in a radio station I worked at, where the boss said to DJs, cut the clag. There was just too much talking. And that's on a station where you could break into a song every now and again. So he hasn't got that option really as a conventional stand-up. But I don't know, it almost sort of veered into self-parody territory. He would be easy to take off, and I just needed to. Well, maybe we come back to something that we every now and again we either praise the script editing or we single it out as perhaps a little bit lacking. And I think maybe there was a better half-hour show with a lot of that the clag cut rather than the 45-minute show that was very wordy and very, very in the head. There's not much gut feeling there. It's all intellect, which is a credit to his bright mind that we've touched on. You don't get into Cambridge by being a complete lightweight intellectually.
Although, I mean, it was and it wasn't. I mean, it did feel like a Guardian lecture, but it wasn't all intellectual. I mean, he did a routine about Rolex and about how Rolex are always set to what is
10 to 2.
10 to 2, isn't it? To make sure they look like the smiley face. And he said, I'd all set them so they all look like they got sad face if I ran the company. Basically saying I'd ruin the company. And, and you kind of think the opposite of logical isn't automatically funny. That's just like, what, you're stupid. Why you wouldn't, if you ran Rolex, you would run them into the ground. That's what you're saying? And think, well, what? That isn't clever. That isn't funny. That's just saying the opposite of what you would logically do. And so I kind of felt a lot of it didn't have the intellectual clout that I think he probably felt that it did. I did find myself wondering what kind of person he was to work alongside or work with. When I noticed that he was credited with being the director of the show.
Yes, writer, performer, and director. So that's 3 big gigs. You meant in the sense what no one could be his director.
What would a director do in that role?
They direct cameras and.
Which he quite clearly wasn't doing unless they cut the cameras afterwards. I mean, I kind of got the impression that maybe they did. But.
Well, they could have. But I mean, these days because memory is so cheap, as opposed to in our day when you had tape and that was expensive. Yeah. I think they'd be on what they used to call ISO. I don't know if they still use that term, meaning well, it's not ISO in the sense they used to have an isolated camera which was recording the whole time, but they couldn't afford to have every camera isolated.
Right.
Although I believe Friends was shot with every camera being recorded individually, so that it could give you a massive headache at the edit, but you've got all options open.
If only they'd done it with all the cameras switched off, the world would have been a better place.
Could have called it a radio show. Could have dubbed on laughter as well.
Yeah.
Right, well, I think I call this meeting to a close. I'm going to guess you haven't got the most flattering score for him, but I'm going to use you as to give me an extra 30 seconds to think what I really want to give it.
Okay. I mean, I had to look around to see what everybody else was saying just to see how mean-spirited I was going to be. And even The Guardian only gave it 3 out of 5. And I think if The Guardian only gave it 3 out of 5, then I'm on safe ground, whatever I do, really. Because this has got to be right up their alley, matron. But for me, I mean, God love him, and I love his work, and I love him as a comedy actor, and I would probably never tire of seeing him in those roles. But for me, it just wasn't a goer at all. It's a 1 out of 5 for me, I'm afraid.
Right. Oh, I don't know where to pitch my tent on this one, because I have got that sort of attempted nice person occasionally comes out for a brief breather.
I mean, can I just say that it isn't about being nice or nasty, though, is it? I mean, it isn't about piling hate on the guy. It's just saying that if you'd paid for it, you would be quite upset. I think as a show, I just don't think it worked. I don't think you cast any further aspersion than that, other than it just didn't work.
It certainly didn't work for either of us. But I'm just always mindful, and you say this every now and again, but I mean, the fact that he can get all those complicated sentences out smoothly. I don't know for a fact whether there was a prompter there or not, but these guys, many of them just, they haven't, certainly starting out, they haven't got the budget for teleprompting, autocue, whatever. And they've got an incredible facility for learning lines and all of that. So there's a lot of talent there, but it comes to naught if you're not laughing. So I'm going to give it 2.5 out of 5. So that's 3.5 out of 5. Not even half marks between us, but with a heavy heart.
Yeah, from both of us really, because he's a guy we quite obviously both like. Shall we draw a veil and move on to homework for next week?
Yes, indeed. And can it be something where one of us at least might laugh?
I think there's a fair chance of this because I think he's probably an ex-neighbour of yours, the lead in this one. Because you spent some time in Pinner, didn't you?
Yeah, well, my dad used to live there. My grandparents were there on my mum's side.
I bet when you were there,
Is it Ronnie Barker came from there?
Yeah, I bet your dad said, "You could just nip round to Ronnie's and see if you can borrow a cup of sugar, will you?"
No, I didn't find out Ronnie lived there until, or even after Ronnie's death. So,
oh, right, okay. Let me see if I can give you another clue to what this is. It is Ronnie Barker, and it also stars a 17-year-old Nicholas Lyndhurst.
Now, I'm not very good on this one, but it's a good exercise for me. I mean, is it the Arkwright thing, or 7 of 1, or Open All Hours? Was it?
Well, I suppose it was. No, it wasn't. But I suppose it was from 7 of 1 in a roundabout kind of way, because as you know, one of 7 of 1 spawned Porridge.
Porridge, right?
And Porridge in turn spawned a one-off series, then he made one, called Going Straight.
Oh, right, yeah, the follow-up. Or obviously after he's left Chokey.
Exactly, yeah. So it follows the Norman Stanley Fletcher as he embarks on his release from prison and as you say, tries to become an honest citizen. Starring Ronnie Barker, Richard Beckinsale, the lovely Patricia Brake, who I think is encapsulated. His daughter Ingrid, is it? Who
I don't know. You're more across it than me on that. I'm trying
famously at visiting time in one of the Porridge episodes, said, "It's all right, Dad, I'm not wearing a bra." And as they pulled back, you could see everybody in the room was looking. Just loved it. And a 17-year-old Nicholas Lyndhurst who plays his son Raymond. So I thought there's 6 or 7 in the series. I thought we'd go for episode 5, which is called Going, Going, Gone. That's Going Straight, Going, Going, Gone, episode 5. That's your homework for next week.
Thank you very much. Well, I say thank you. I hope I will have cause to thank you afterwards. It sets the bar quite high, though, doesn't it, Porridge, for anything to follow it? So
yeah, it's interesting as well, isn't it? The concept of the spin-off, which I'm sure we'll investigate next time round as well.
Going Straight, episode 5. Well, thank you for that. I think I'm thanking you. I'd rather thank you now than not feel like it next week. Okay, so we are on Twitter. We are at Comedy Slab. We'd love you to follow us there. We have jolly japes, little gags. We don't overload you with material. It's quality, not quantity. So at Comedy Slab on Twitter, do follow us there. We're also at Comedy Slab, the Facebook page. You've got a good thing going there, haven't you? I mean, I try to avoid Facebook, not because I don't want to see our page, but I just call it the sinkhole of time. It's like Hotel California. You can go there, but you can never leave. So, yeah, I've never found time for it, but hopefully you will, dear listener. Ignore me. Don't follow my lead. Who does? And what else? Personal recommendations to the Comedy Slab, to friends, family, whomever, religious leaders, political figureheads, you name it. Bingo callers, the lot. We'd love to get the word out. And thank you in advance for that. And also thank you in advance for your generous star rating at Apple Podcasts or iTunes. Call it what you will. And a little word about why you enjoy the show, assuming you do. Very presumptuous of me. Let me steer you in that direction, and thank you in advance for any kindnesses you show us there.
I felt sure you were going to say bingo callers, 2 fat ladies, 2 little ducks, whoever you want to recommend it to. Talking about Facebook, I've got to mention that next week's episode will be brought to you courtesy of listener Ewan Balshaw, who sent me a note on our Facebook page. And suggested it, actually. He suggested, have you thought about doing Going Straight? And I said, that's a brilliant idea. I'll stick it on my list. And I have done. I've stuck it on my list. So, Ewan, thanks for that. And
are you sure? Are you sure he didn't say, have you ever thought about going straight yourself, Shane?
No, he mentioned it, actually. It's probably, I've got the wrong end of the shtick again, haven't I?
You have. And while we're crediting our loyal fan base, the wonderful Blair Carlton, every bit as wonderful as his very stylish name, has voted for us in. Is it the same? Did you see this, Shane? In a podcast award category thing, very kindly. I don't know if it's the same podcast awards that Jocelyn was voting for us a couple of weeks in.
I know we were jostling for position.
I
don't know.
How you've got the cheek to critique any comedy after saying things like that?
I know, but I don't get paid for it, so it's all right, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Well,
like, this is all for free. I mean, who paid for this? Let's be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just can't wait till we get an audience back in here, and then it'll sound completely different again.
Yeah, it'll still be deathly quiet though at the end of all your gags.
Shut up, get on with it, you idiot.
We miss the slow hand clapping, don't we? At least it's some noise.
Yes. No. So I'm not really quite sure in terms of the award, which one it is. I don't care. I just love the way that on Twitter the other day you started your acceptance speech a little bit early.
Yes. Well, yeah. It's just I don't think there'll be another opportunity to start it at all. That's all. But
I'd like to thank my parents, of course, obviously for having me. I'd like to thank
my producer,
my priest, my imam, my bingo caller, my two fat ladies.
Clickety click.
Off we go again.